I tell people the biggest lesson out of the Miracle on the Hudson was to be less judgmental. And that one thing has shifted the way I've grown my business. And all of a sudden, I stopped judging. We're all vulnerable in this. And all of a sudden, I'm being less judgmental. All of a sudden, it's opened up so many avenues for me. I've become such more vulnerable. And I found by being authentic, you'll get what you get. Some people like it. Some people don't like it. That's called life. Okay, cool.
Hey, Dave, I'm super excited to have you join me for this episode of Coffee with Closers.
Sam, thank you for having me today. I'm excited to be with you. Thank you.
Man, it's got to be Providence that I ran into you at a most recent event. You were a speaker at that conference, and I think we were sitting on a discussion table, and come to find out you had this amazing story, which we'll get into in a few seconds. I'm like, man, Dave, I got to have you on my show. And then that's how we got started, and here we are meeting today. So Dave, every entrepreneur has some interesting story. And in your case, you're an intrapreneur. You worked at big corporations like Oracle, and you were a top producer for a very, very long time. And now here you are, a business coach, an entrepreneur, published multiple books. You have your own magazine. You were even a radio host for quite a while. And you're on stages speaking to hundreds and thousands of people about how to deal with traumas in their life and how they can overcome. So of all the accomplishments that you've had in your life, what's the one thing you're super proud of?
That's a great question. I think the one that I'm the proudest of is I've had 4 kids that have gotten through school, and they're all, they all are on their own right now. They've all grown up to a point where they can handle themselves and handle their business. And I think that's the greatest accomplishment anybody can have, is make sure that their legacy is set with their family. So I think that's, all the business accomplishment I've had has been great, but when your family can handle themselves, and that you've done your job and your wife has done their job, I don't think there's any better feeling than that.
Yeah, you feel like you've contributed to their achievement and their success as well, right? Because you've created the environment for them to thrive and grow.
And I'm sure I wasn't there enough for them, because candidly, I was traveling a lot, doing what I was doing to make sure that they had a life opportunity. But I think that overall, one of the things that I learned from my parents is you got to make decisions when you're young, and you got to understand consequences. And I think it's one of the things we did well, is that we let them make decisions, and they had to had consequences. So when they had to make the tough calls, and when they got out of school, and I mean, as you know, nothing is pixie dust and sunshine. Everybody goes through challenges. The goal is to be right 51% of the time. So I think that's one of the things that I'm most proud of, is our way my kids have grown up, and they're all self-sufficient.
Yeah. So I have another question. So of all the things that have happened to your life, what's the one thing you're super grateful for? I think that will open up our conversation on what we want to kind of cover as well.
This is going to sound probably really funny, but I'm really grateful that I went through the plane crash experience. I mean, I think, I was on a call the other day, Samuel. We were talking about that, and he asked us, was that the life-changing moment? And I said, no, it wasn't. It actually happened about 6-7 weeks later, when all of a sudden I sort of had an awakening that, I am really blessed. I am really blessed. I survived something. I'm a part of something that people remember. And now I get the opportunity to go out and help other people. I think so, as I look back, there's a lot of things that I'm really happy. I mean, I'm a top producer. I'm there. There's money there. I mean, it's great. But, I survived along with 154 other people, something that was on international TV. And people remember it, and I can be a role model for somebody who may be going through a challenging experience in their life.
Yeah. So people definitely know the event, but can you give a little context on that life-altering event that happened to you?
Yeah, I was on a business trip for my company. It was Oracle at that point in time. Coming back, we got done early because we were working in a distribution center in Brooklyn, New York. And, when you're in a distribution center, we were doing logistics and transportation and warehouse, systems. So, those start early in the morning because trucks come in 5 o'clock in the morning. So we started our day early, and we got done early. So it was my opportunity to get home early after a 3-day business trip. So I changed my flight to go on flight US Airways Flight 1549, which turned out to be what's now called the Miracle on the Hudson, the plane that went into the Hudson River. And I was not supposed to be on that plane, but I switched to be on an earlier flight, which changed the entire destiny of my life. That was an experience that no one, I think, would ever want to go through. But it's all the way you look at it and all the meaning you attach to it, and the meaning I attach to it. I survived something, and now I have something, I can do something with it to help somebody else.
So obviously you've had a lot of other life events and experiences that have kind of brought you to this stage, and we want to kind of get into your entrepreneurial journey as well. Can you share a little bit about prior to that? How have the life prepared you? Because you worked at Oracle, you actually had a lot of interaction with Tony Robbins.
Yep.
You've been around him for a very long time, and a lot of other very very reputable names in our community. So
Yeah, I was, I was,
what? Mhm.
yeah, I was very blessed, Samuel. I mean, one of the things that happened to me, I think that if I had to look back through my entire life, the one thing that I would say would help me transform and revolutionize my life was in 1984 when my dad kicked me out of the house because I didn't have a
Mhm.
job after college. And he told me I had 30 days to get out of the house and get a job. And
Mhm.
I tell people one of the great things about my father, he was a man of his word. And it was a
Mhm.
great lesson for me to be a man of your word, right? Back up what you're going to say. And he backed it up, but I wasn't out. So he helped me get my first job, which happened to be a second assistant restaurant manager at a place called Howard Johnson.
Mhm.
And so, I knew nothing about hotels and restaurants, but I was out of his house, right? So my third stop was here in Charlotte, North Carolina, where I live right now. And when, no, don't know if you know anything about restaurants and hotels, but when you're the second assistant, it means you're not working 9 to 5. You're working second and third shift. And that's what
Mhm.
that was me. I was responsible for second and or third shift, depending on the day. But that became a very good blessing for me because there was a gentleman and a lady that would come in every night. His name was Bill and her name was Bonnie. He was approximately 77 at that point in time, and he was an older gentleman. He always wore a flannel shirt. He drove a pickup truck. We lived in North Carolina, and he came in for coffee and ice cream every night, and we talked
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
we talked, and and that was cool. And I didn't know anything about Bill until he offered me, because I was dating my future wife, and I had no money. So I told him that I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I want to take her out, for a good time and all this. He gave me a couple movie passes. He said, "Here, take your girl out on me." I said, "Well, thank you." Right? I mean, and that's when movie passes were $2.50. Right? I mean,
Mhm.
I was just happy to be able to take my future wife. But he said, "Promise me one thing. Just tell me what your experience was about. Right? Tell me
Mhm.
about it." So I went, and when we checked in, this young gentleman said, "Tell Mr. Bill Hay." And I'm like, "Okay, okay." That didn't resonate with me, right?
Mhm.
So we come back the next day, and Bill asked me, "Well, how'd it go?" I'm like, "Well, some dude asked me to tell you, hey." He goes, "Yeah, because I own that movie theater. In
Mhm.
fact, I've owned over 80 movie theaters and restaurants in the Carolinas since the 20s."
Mhm.
So this guy was a multimillionaire, right? And I would call him, and his nickname back then, back in the 80s, was he was the Sam Walton of Charlotte, where
Mhm.
the guy that you wouldn't even know, but he was an entrepreneur. He knew how his business. So fast forward, Sam, to January 20 or December 24th, 1984. He rolls in early that day, about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You got to remember this is winter, right? It was getting dark. He said he wanted to show me what he got his wife Bonnie for Christmas. It was a brand new blue Corvette.
Mhm.
Now I'd never seen a Corvette. I couldn't spell Corvette, never smelled a Corvette, but it was the coolest thing I ever saw, man.
Mhm.
I mean, it was beautiful, right? I love cars. It was beautiful. He tossed me his keys. Said, "Here, let's take a ride." So we go up and down Woodlawn Road here in Charlotte, right? In his blue Corvette. We pull in, gave him the keys back. Said, "Man, Bonnie's really going to dig this, man." He goes, "You need one of these."
Mhm.
I said, "Bill, I'm making $13,000 a year. I
Mhm.
can barely afford to pay my rent." He goes, "That's your problem. That's your problem." He said, "Let me show you how to be successful. Let me show you what it's going to take to be a business person." So for the next 13 years, he mentored me. He gave me
Mhm.
these lessons. He learned through his entire time from the 20s on, right? How he became who he became. So we fast forward to May of 1997. I've been with him for 12 or 13 years. We would talk. I was moving around. I was growing. I was in sales at this point in time, right? Things were going well. And he called me and he said, "I want to tell you a couple things." He said, "First, I want to let you know that I have lung cancer." Bill smoked unfiltered Camel since the 20s. So
Mhm.
not a shock, right? Surprised, but not shocked, right? But then
Mhm.
he went over to his desk, Samuel, and pulled out these old rumpled notes, these pieces of paper, and put them on my lap. And he said, "I want to give you this." I said, "What is it?" He goes, "These are the handwritten notes I wrote down in 1929 on how I was going to be successful. I want to
Mhm.
give this to you, but you have to promise me something." I said, "Okay, what?" He goes, "Don't let it die with you." And he
Mhm.
passed away of September of that year. So I have these notes. What do?
Mhm.
Nothing. I
Mhm.
do nothing. I put them in a journal. Stick them in this credenza right behind me here. Stick them in there. And after Miracle on the Hudson happens, I was with Tony Robbins. He took me on, right? I had 10 years of being with him. I was the head of security, so I was being mentored by the best, right? I mean, one of the things that I teach when I coach and mentor people is proximity is power. How to put yourself in proximity of people who can make things happen. But then here I am. It's 2016, 2015, 2016, and I'm going to write this book about my experience on the Miracle on the Hudson. And I'm in my office here, and all of a sudden, I'm trying to figure this thing out, right? I'm okay. What am I going to write about? I start taking notes. So I go to my credenza and go through all my notes that I've written all these years, and I find these notes. And I'm like, what an idiot I am. I've had gold in my hands, and I don't do anything with it. But more importantly, I go back to what I told you. The first thing I said, right? As my dad said, your word is your bond. I made a promise I had fulfilled. And that's why I do what I do. This is why I became an entrepreneur. That's why I left Oracle. This is why I'm doing it, because I am going to fulfill this commitment. I'm not going to let whatever he did and Tony did and my current mentor, Don Barden, is doing with me, die with me. So I've got all this knowledge. I've got all this ways, and I can compress it for people so I can simplify it so they can take it and run with it. And they can do something with it. And they can pass it on to the next generation. That's why I do what I do, Samuel. And that's how I got to where I am. So I think, going back to your original question, the most important thing was when that gentleman came into that restaurant, and I got to meet him.
And what are those some of those notes that he handed over from his 1929? Did they make it into the books, or did those become some principles of life?
No, I mean, so now we fast forward. They were not in my Moments Matter book. I had maybe had a couple quotes, but when COVID hits, right? We're now going 2019, 2020, right? And we're all sitting around our offices trying to figure out what we're going to do, right? How are we going to go on? So that's why I wrote my book, From Turmoil to Triumph. And the book is about the power of mentoring and what he did. And I took 12 of his lessons that he taught me. And I wrote these lessons out, how he taught me these lessons and the meaning of the lessons, and how you too can apply those lessons in your life. And what I found out as I was writing this, because this came from the notes, is my mom actually taught me the same things. But your mom and your dad are too close. So a lot of times, I mean, I don't know if you got kids. A lot of times my kids didn't listen to me, right? I mean, you're too close. You need that third person, give it a different perspective. And that's what this book's about, is that, these lessons are out there. I mean, there's nothing new. But sometimes you need that mentor, that coach, to give you a perspective. That's what I do now. That's why I do what I do. Then I wrote chapter 13. And I wasn't going to write chapter 13. But what happened was that chapter 13 is about my experience of going back into the Hudson River, where I almost died, is swimming with the Navy SEALs. And that story on how you go from not being able to swim to being able to do something of that magnitude in 100 days. And I share the strategy on how you can get whatever outcome you want in 100 days, because I figured out a strategy on how I do it. So when I need to get an outcome for my business or whatever in my life, I've got my roadmap. So now I'm teaching the roadmap of how to, what I call, compress decades into days. How to take something major you got going on in your life, say you want to lose 30, 40 pounds, how you can do that in 100 days. How you can go back and conquer something in 100 days. So I wrote chapter 13 of that book. That book is about that 100 days strategy. So yeah, I'm very proud of that book, because that's 12 of those lessons Bill taught me.
Yeah. Would you give us a little bit of a teaser on what some of those strategies are, especially if you're trying to compress some life goals into such a short time frame?
Yeah, one of them is, one of the chapters I call it is, no means on. And, and I wrote that specifically like that because one of the lessons he was teaching me was, when someone tells you no, it's not no. It's that it's how the representation you're giving to it. So, and he said, I shared a couple of stories about him being told no when he wanted to start his first movie theater. He didn't have any money. This was the 1920s. This was Depression, right? And this is and he wants to go start a movie theater, and he had to figure out how to do it. And people kept telling him no. And what he figured out is, it wasn't the movie theater. It was people needed to eat. So that's when he would sell popcorn, a ticket and popcorn for 5 cents. People could eat and go to the movies. And that's how he started his first movie theater. So when he took all these no's, he just turned around and said, you know what? No really means I'm ready to go. That's one of those lessons that he taught me. So, I don't look at rejection. It's a learning experience for me, right? We
Mm-hmm.
all get hit in the face, right? I mean, the best baseball batters hit 300, right? They fail
Mm-hmm.
70% of the time. So it's all in the way you represent it. Another one
Yeah.
was about the power of faith. And, because what happened was that we lost our 7-month-old son. And I went into business mode because, I had never buried anybody. I didn't know what to do. And here you have your son, you need to bury him. And
Mm-hmm.
so I went into business mode. Okay. I do this. And I didn't go grieving. I didn't grieve at all. Right. But about a week later, after everything settles down, I was like a mess.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I had a meeting with Bill, and because he knew that something was going on. And he tells me this story about back in the 30s and 40s when he had a son. And his son was 18 years old in 1947, 1948, right? And back
Mm-hmm.
then everybody had to serve. You got to go to the army, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's peacetime, right? It's after the World War. And then in 1950, Korea comes,
Mm-hmm.
and his son gets called up to go to Korea, and his son dies. And he said a long time he had remorse. He could have done something. He had the financial means to make something happen, but he didn't because his mindset, and you got to remember the mindset,
Mm-hmm.
going back in the 20s and 30s, everybody's got a duty to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
You got to serve. And he said, you got to remember, Dave, the same God who started this thing was with Jesus that day on the cross, was with my son that day, is with your son. That's the
Mm-hmm.
only certainty we have is that one being. So this happened for a reason and a purpose. And one day you may find out why, but it just happens, right? You have to move on. He said that was when he started moving on and he started focusing on how he can serve a bigger way with other people. So having
Mm-hmm.
faith that there's something bigger out there, there's a reason behind it, but you may never know it. But knowing that it's there happens for a reason and a purpose, that gave me great solace, helped me move on. And it was I think one of the best chapters that we wrote.
Yeah. So I think that there's two concepts that you mentioned, right? One is kind of reframing, right? Because I think
Right.
understanding how to look at the circumstances kind of differently. When somebody says no, no, it means on, right? Like
Yep.
even some people have a tendency to kind of make their past define their current and their future, and kind of having remorse and regrets and just holding on to some of those thoughts, and they never move past that, and which I think
Right.
is one of the things that you're certainly helping people, especially people who have dealt with traumas and everything else. And the other one is kind of like you said, having a bigger perspective on, why am I here, and there's a greater being about all of us that has put us on here on earth for a greater purpose, right? And
Yep.
without some sort of a level of faith, and I think a lot of people have, they just don't know what the purpose, right? When they're going through turmoil, disappointments, heartaches, or even like life altering events like the ones that you've been through, right? They don't necessarily have a meaning for life, and oftentimes they question everything. So I think that's very, very important lessons.
Yep.
So obviously you've written multiple books and you prepare people to kind of overcome obstacles and overcome life altering events that they may have gone through. What are some common misconceptions that you've seen people have? Because I think one of the things that you said, people who've gone through like mass transportation accidents or anything like that. I mean, that's a very, very, very rare incidents, but they could be very traumatizing. Right. So, what are some misconceptions or issues that people have when they go through such life experiences that kind of hold them back?
I mean, yeah, one of the reasons I went back to the Hudson River is to help Navy SEALs that have fallen on hard times.
Mm-hmm.
Because the suicide rate in the military now is 22 stated is 22 a
Wow.
day, which is out of control,
Wow. Mm.
out of control. So that's one of the reasons I started doing that. So I got to be around a lot of special operations, Navy SEALs, Green Berets, Army Rangers, who are in that mode of transition, who are challenged. And I see a lot of things and hear a lot of things. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that I see a lot is, why did this happen to me? Why did this happen to me? And I'll give you a little example. So I was coming back from a speaking engagement at the Golden Isles in Georgia. It's down on the shore in Georgia. I was on the I-95 going north, driving home back to Charlotte. And I don't know if you've ever been on I-95 on the East Coast. It's like a parking lot. So you're not going anywhere, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you're going 20 miles an hour slow. But I get this phone call as I'm just sitting there on I-95. I remember like it was just this guy who I knew from my
Mm-hmm.
Tony Robbins interactions. So I need your help. Okay, sure. I've got a friend who just got back. She survived the avalanche in Nepal. and she's locked up. She won't talk to anybody, and I can't get through to her, and no one can get to her. Will you talk to her? I said, well, if no one can get to her, how am I? She goes, will you do it? Will you make a phone call to her? I said, sure, but I don't know what I can offer, right? I mean, I survived a plane crash. And that's what he said. You survived a plane crash, at least you could talk to her about something. So I get through this young lady, right? And what was going on with this young lady is she was one of the 4 people that survived the avalanche. Everybody else died. And so she was having that guilt syndrome, right? Why did they die, right? And I shared a story what happened to me about 6 weeks after the miracle on the Hudson is when the plane crashed in Buffalo when all 40 some people died when it went into the house on the descent to the airport. And I had a client on that plane from Charlotte. So I was very close to a lot of things on that incident. So I did an interview. I told you I did an interview in Montreal, and one of the first questions they asked me, which took me totally off guard, Sam, it was, why do you think those people died on that crash in Buffalo, but you survived? And I was flabbergasted. I was like, I know, like, I didn't know what to say. I'm like, well, it just wasn't my time. That's what I said. That was my answer on that. It wasn't my time, which I don't know if it was elegant, but I said it. So I told her, I said, listen, it wasn't your time to die, right? But then that didn't get to her. She was still locked in. I see this all the time, right? I mean, it's so deep because what happens is it stacks and stacks and stacks. And I'll give you an example of that in a second. So I said, you know what? I took this on as a challenge. Now I said, okay, I've got to figure a way out to get this message to her. So one of the ways that I have learned to do that, and one of the strategies that I use is by reference. So I called a friend in London who had a friend down in Liberia, in Africa. And he said, this young man is the happiest young man. I said, well, what does he do? He goes, he gets water every day. So is that what he does? He gets water every day. He's happy? Yeah. So let's talk to him. So I get on this call with a 3 or 4 way call, international call with this guy, and he's happy as can be. And what he does every day is he gets up, he goes get water for his family, he brings it back, he's happy. So I said, would you get on a call with me with this young lady in Canada? Sure. Right? So we get on this call. I set this call up from Samuel, and I said, would you just tell her what you do every day? I go get water. And it's like, is that what you do? Why are you so happy? I'm above ground. I get water every day for my family. I'm doing something for my family. And I said, that was the story that she needed to hear. She needed, there's no reason you have to be happy. You can be happy for any reason. It wasn't her time. She has other ways she can serve now. And that's what happened. This gentleman, third party, right? Third, fourth, or fifth party, maybe even fifth party, got her a message. You know what? I get up every day and I'm happy because I'm happy. He lives in barely with anything. We're very blessed here in the Western world. We got running water, we have electricity, and now it's the message she needs to hear. It's like, you know what? You're here for a reason, right? I told her at the end, I said, why don't you just go out and tell your story? And because one of the ways that I learned through my experience is one of the reasons I grew instead of going into a depressed mode is I got it out of my body. And one of the ways you grow out of a traumatic life experience is you get it out of your body. Because what happens is it stacks in your body. And I'll give you an example. Do you remember COVID? Right?
Yes.
We had COVID. But do you remember now? I'm looking at what happened during that time frame. You had COVID going on, right? By the way, you also have social justice stuff going on, right? By the way, you still have police stuff going on, right? By the way, you had an election that didn't stop, right? And all these things were stacking on people. And they were by themselves. They had no community. And what happened? The suicide rate went up. I mean, people were going crazy, right? Because it was stacking. Because the meaning they attach is, I'm so deep, I don't know how to get out of this thing. And that's what the people who actually thrived out of that figured out that strategy. Is like, okay, I can do things in a different way to be able to add value. Or at least some people said, I'm so deep, I'll just stay in my office. I won't go anyplace. Which gets deeper. So that's what happened to her, and she finally came out. So, it's what I see a lot of times with a lot of people is that they let it stack so deep, they don't get it out. So first strategy I do is change the way your physiology is, move your body, do something physically, and then start getting it out. Well, I don't have any place to speak, Dave, like you. I said, well, you know where I spoke first? I spoke at a church. I spoke at Chamber of Commerce's, spoke at Rotaries. And I got paid what?
Nothing. Yeah.
Nothing. And I got it out of my body. I was able to figure things out of my mind because I got it out first. And that's why a lot of people from that day had PTSD or depression because the representation they made of the plane crash was devastating.
Mm-hmm.
I was in a plane crash, and I was like, I took a different. I said, you know what? This was a blessing. This gave me an opportunity, and as you stated, it's the meaning you attach to something produces the emotion of your life, and emotion is your life. So whatever meaning you attach is the emotion you're going to have, and the habits are the ones that control your flow of thought. So if you have lousy habits, you're going to have lousy thoughts. So you got to change your habits. So these are the things that I talk about and teach, Samuel. And this is how you get how to grow out of a traumatic life or any challenging experience. These little things, right?
Yeah. And I think, sometimes the thing is some of these are very common sense information, but people still fail to implement it.
Yep.
So why is that the case? Because obviously not everybody, is going to have an experience where they, had that miracle on the Hudson sort of experience, but they all have their own personal traumas. Yep. Some people, like you said, have figured out a strategy even during COVID. They somehow bounce back, but there are still people stuck in that mental state and really abusing themselves in all kinds of bad habits, like you said, right? The habits, and now they're in a very, very bad place in life. Why is that the case? And even though they know that the power relies in them to actually overcome some of these bad habits and bad thoughts.
I think because they don't understand there are references out there. There are you're not, and it's one thing my mother taught me years ago. You're the first person to go through this, right? There's somebody else that's going through this and something worse than you have. And so I think what happens to a lot of people is they get in their mind so much they ask themselves lousy questions, right? And what's called their internal representation. They ask themselves lousy questions. So, and I used to ask myself lousy questions like, why does this always happen to me? I can never get across the 5-yard line. I get to the end and all of a sudden I blow it up. I'm a failure, right? I can't get it done. But then that becomes what? Your identity. And your identity is the most powerful force that you have in your life, is what you identify as. So a lot of people, you know what? I know a lot of people just like to have a pity party all the time. They're happy when they're not happy. Because then that's their identity. It's like, poor Dave, poor Sherry, right? She always has something going on in her life. The way to do that, and that's why this book, my second book, From Turmoil to Triumph, that's why I named it what I did. Is because the fastest way to get out of that is first change your physiology, ask yourself different questions. But third, find a mentor, find a coach, find somebody else, right? And well, how can I find somebody else? I'm not like you who knows everybody. I didn't know everybody. But you have to step up, and you have to actually, and this is one of the things I teach in my workshop now. You got to be your own coach. Sometimes you have to be your own coach, like in baseball. And you go on a pitcher, right? And a pitcher, he's having a bad inning, right? He's all over the place. And it's like, the coach can't come out every 5 seconds, right? You got to be your own coach, which is a great metaphor for me. So I tell people, sometimes you got to be your own coach, which means you got to ask for help. You got to ask somebody, listen, I don't know you from Adam, but I've read something you've done. I've heard something you did. I've seen a video on YouTube. Reach out to them. Because one of the great things now compared to 1984 when I was going, in my time, right, was you have the internet now. And there's people out there. You can get references on the internet, and you can actually get in contact with people. You can go to LinkedIn and message somebody and say, listen, I read your book. I saw your video. I heard you on a podcast. I have a question. And that's how I interact with so many people. It's like, I do that. Hey, I heard something. I don't understand it. Can you give me help me with some clarity? And all of a sudden I have a new relationship. It's not because I'm Dave Sanderson. It's because I asked.
Yeah. And I think that's another misconception people obviously have. And people feel like, oh, I can't reach people. I can't approach them and they're not going to want to help me. And then they try to, like you said, they'd rather create a pity party and hang around with people that are going to keep you down as opposed to finding people that are going to pull you out of the dirt that you're in. And that's essentially where I think you have to go to. And I think that's certainly is an opportunity for people if they really want to get out of the rut.
Well, one of the things my mentor taught me, and I finally started doing it a few years ago, and he did it. And obviously it worked for him, it's worked for other people. It's nothing new, but I have my kitchen cabinet, right? I have my own kitchen cabinet. Now, back then, your kitchen cabinet were the people primarily in your locality you were close to, right? But now what I have found is I can have a kitchen cabinet on the internet. Listen, I'll give you a couple examples of people on my kitchen cabinet. And you're like, how are they on your kitchen cabinet? I'll tell you what, Abraham Lincoln's one of them. Well, he's been dead for over 150 years. Yeah, but he left all of his stuff behind, and I can read about how to be a leader in times of crisis. I have Ronald Reagan on my kitchen cabinet. He's been dead for, 18 years, right? Yeah, but he left all his stuff behind about how to communicate. He was a great communicator, right? How does he communicate and move people? So you can go out and read all this information. You can have people. I have 3 people that are close to me, right? That I can touch physically. But most of my people are people who are leaders in their industry that I can just tap in. When I need to tap into something, I need something on leadership. I need something on communication. I need something on health. That's what I did. That's why I've lost 30 pounds. I'm swimming with seals. I'm doing it because and 3 years ago, Samuel, you look at me like, how's this dude? This guy's a beast whale, right? And all of a sudden now I'm doing these things because on my kitchen, I got somebody with health and fitness who gave me insights, right?
Yeah. I think that's why I think we need to also look at people around us like basically God has put them in your life for a reason and for a purpose, right? Because you have to understand that they may have something unique that they can offer you, and there might be some value that you can provide in exchange to help them as well, right? Because sometimes
look at Strategic Coach, right? Look at Strategic Coach. One of the greatest things about that is, and the Coach Con was great because you got to be with all these entrepreneurs who've all had challenges.
Yes.
You know what? Every one of those people there, every 450 plus of those people there had a challenge to grow to where they're at.
Yeah.
What a resource to have, right? I mean,
certainly.
I'm going to tell you, my biggest issue, right? When I started this whole thing, one thing I could do really, really well, because I did it for 37 years, is drive revenue. I could find revenue. What I could not do very well is payables, receivables, all the other stuff. And all of a sudden, I have people not even paying me. Now I'm letting people slide. And all of a sudden, I'm taking money out of savings, and all of a sudden, I'm in trouble. I'm going into debt. So I had to find. We talked. They someone teaches who for your house, right? Yeah. So I had to put people around me to do things really well, so I can focus on what we call the unique ability, or I call the distinct advantage you have. And all of a sudden, you start growing. So yes, put yourself around people, because everybody I call has had a personal plane crash in their life.
Yeah.
Whether they've maybe they've had cancer, maybe they've survived a car accident, right? Maybe they've lost a loved one. Everybody's had something, but you're not the first person. There's other people that have got through it. All you got to do is model that. Find somebody else and model it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think also vulnerability is an important aspect as well, right? Because a lot of times I think we try to put, this amazing like an amazing display of our strength and our everything else, right? Like we show off this amazing strength. And then oftentimes we're kind of creating a facade, right? We're trying to cover up everything else. And I think if you're open up and share with people, like you said, to that Bill, the mentor, and say, hey, I got no money. I'm trying to go have a date, and I need, I got to figure out how to take care of this girl. And then he's like, well, let me give you a couple of movie tickets, right? Because he understood your circumstance, and then he was able to do that. But I think sometimes it's actually being that vulnerable enough to share. And that's true in leadership too. And that's true in seeking personal help in life.
I was in a documentary a few years ago called Be Who You Are. And they came to Charlotte, they interviewed me, and then they interviewed a lot of other people. And I saw the premiere, right? And the people that were in that movie, that documentary, I would have never associated with. Never. I mean, it was the founder of Planned Parenthood, okay? Or the executive director of Planned Parenthood, okay? There were people who were transsexual, right? I've never been around that. But all of a sudden, what that movie did, not only for me, but from other people, I think, is, if you just, like you said, if you're vulnerable, just be who you are, people will accept you. I mean, so now I have a higher tolerance of acceptance right now of people who are authentic and vulnerable, right? I don't judge them. I have to admit, the biggest lesson, I tell people, the biggest lesson out of the Miracle on the Hudson was to be less judgmental. And that one thing has shifted the way I've grown my business. Now I find that I was pretty judgmental in the past, and I would judge people pretty quickly. And I was saying, if I could just change one thing, and I did that, is that if I could do what Martin Luther King said, judge people by the content of their character, just do that. How would that change my life? And that's what happened. And all of a sudden, I stopped judging, and I got in this movie, and I'm like, with all these, I would never be around these people, right? Yeah. And all of a sudden, it's like, you know what? We're all vulnerable in this. They wouldn't be around me either. right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I'm being less judgmental. All of a sudden, it's opened up so many avenues for me. I've become such more vulnerable, and I found by being authentic, you get what you get, right?
Yeah.
You'll get what you get. Some people like it, some people don't like it. That's called life.
Yeah. So obviously, even in the Hudson River experience that you had, right, where Sully, they made a movie after him, and here's a man who actually was under pressure within a matter of 3 minutes. I think he had to get the airplane. I mean, 3 minutes is nothing. Like going through the documentations and finding out what options he has, and he said, "No way, I'm going to make it," and he had to kind of ditch it into the water. But talk about decision making under crisis, and especially when you're going through crises that are very, very, like you've never been through something like it. What advice would you give entrepreneurs and business leaders on how they can prepare? Excuse me. What advice would you give entrepreneurs and business leaders in terms of how they can make very strategic and bold decisions that are well thought out, but not necessarily, you may not have had any prior experience on making a decision like that before?
I talk about the two key tenets I believe in leadership are the ability to be resourceful, ability to be able to make a decision. And a lot of people have problems with both of those. They lock down. They don't see the resources they really have available to them, or they can't make a call. They just can't make a call, right? Or because they're afraid they're going to make the wrong call. Well, like we talked about earlier, you only got to be right 51% of the time to be, But one of the things that I teach now is I call the leadership quadrant, about how to make decisions, but also the timing of decisions. And I'll give you a quick example. I'll break it down into two different quadrants. One was you can make a right decision, but at the wrong time, right? Or you can make a wrong decision at the right time. And I'll give you an example. Do you remember, I don't know if you remember this, but in 1939, Neville Chamberlain, who was the prime minister of Great Britain, went to talk to Hitler before the war to try to get him to not do the war. It was the right decision to try to get the war stopped before the war started. But it was the wrong time. Because what happened is Hitler, he acquiesced, and Hitler took over Czechoslovakia, Sudetenland, and the war started. So he had the right intent, but it was the wrong time. Now contrast that with what Captain Sullenberger did. He has to make a decision, like you said, in 3 minutes, 2.5, 3 minutes, right? He makes the right decision at the right time, and you call it a miracle. So when it comes to decision making, a lot of it's timing. A lot of it's you have to be able to quickly assess upside, downside, and be able to make the call and stick with the call. Because I tell people, listen, if he would have made that call and somebody dies, he's a dog, right? He killed somebody. So you gotta give him all the credit, because on the other side, if something happens, he's going to take the hit.
Exactly.
So part of decision making is you got to be willing to take the hit, right?
Yeah.
You got to be willing to take the hit, because the reward, if you get the rewards, you got to be able, if it goes bad, you got to take the personal responsibility. I made the call. It's on me. We're going to make this thing right. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's actually a big leadership lesson. I think we see that time and time again. People are very willing to take the credit, but if there is something goes south, they're not willing to take the responsibility of
See that in politics
decisions.
all the time. These are politicians, right? They want the credit for a good economy, but then when all something goes backwards, that's somebody else's problem.
Yeah.
That's why Harry Truman was so loved. At first, no one thought Harry Truman was going to be president because he was just a weak guy from Missouri. And first thing he did that first day after he took the oath of office, after Franklin Delano Roosevelt died, was the buck stops here, right? Put it on his desk. I make the call. He made the call on the atomic bomb, right? Took a lot of hits for that. Yeah. But it was the right call at the right time, because he saved a lot of lives, right? Yeah. So, that's why people respect that. And it's called congruency. They're congruent, right? Whatever they say they're going to do, they do, and they live with the results.
Yeah.
So
most certainly. Obviously, when you talked about making right decision at the right time, and those are the kind of people that you want in your team. So how do you identify such people, especially if you're trying to build an organization, create a company culture, and encourage such bold decision-making capacity, and then also do it at the right time, because you don't want people just prematurely deciding to do things that may cause turmoil later on.
That's what we do on our team. I've had to learn that skill set. And I learned it initially when I had the opportunity to be around a gentleman named General Norman Schwarzkopf. When I was with Tony Robbins, I escorted him. We were in Hawaii. And I was around a 4-star general who just won a war, right? In 63 days, he wins a war, right? So it's like you're around somebody who's actually done something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Major in the world stage. And I learned a lot of things that day being around him. But one of the things he said, and I teach this now, is that he said that, 5 plus 15 is greater than 15 plus 5.
Hmm.
And at first I didn't understand that. Then he gave me an example, and I'm going to give you the military example. You can
Mm-hmm.
translate that to business, okay? The military example said, listen, I had something I had to get done. I would give it to a lieutenant, which would be a
Mm-hmm.
manager in the real world,
Mm-hmm.
right? I gave it to a lieutenant. Here it is, right? And what would the lieutenant do? The lieutenant can either lead or he could
Mm-hmm.
be a manager. And most lieutenants are managers, which means they'll have a project. All right, Sam, I got the team together. This is the project. This is what
Mm-hmm.
needs to be done. This is how it needs to be done, when it needs to be done, how it needs to be done. And they'll give
Mm-hmm.
you 5 minutes to say, okay, you need anything from me? Let me know. He said, but if you're going to be a leader and a decision maker, this is how he said, this is how he taught people. Here's your project. If you
Mm-hmm.
have any questions, call me. You figure out how it's done. All I want, this is the outcome. And
Mm-hmm.
he'd walk away. And they could come to him anytime and ask for his judgment, right? But he said he had to trust his people, right? He
Mm-hmm.
said sometimes they didn't do it exactly the way he wanted it done, but they got the outcome. So that's what I teach in my company. When I have a project, I give you an example. I had a CRM, right?
Mm-hmm.
We were implementing a CRM. And I fought it, Samuel. I fought it. It's a big project. They didn't want to spend the money. It was like the death of me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I hired an operations manager. Lisa, this is your job. If you want my help me. But here's your job. You got 8 weeks to get it done. She got done in 8 weeks. We had a full CRM financial system rocking and rolling
Mm-hmm.
because I stepped away and I gave her the ability to make decisions on what needed to be done.
Mm-hmm.
She only came to me 1 or 2 times, Samuel. Maybe asked me a couple of things, right? But then I learned that if I trust people who are competent, right? These are 3 things that I look for in people. And this is one of the reasons how I teach this. First thing, I want somebody who's confident, who comes across as, you know what, I can do it. Confident. Second thing, I have to have some competency. They've had to be able
Mm-hmm.
to do something in the past I can see, right? They got competency. But third is the one thing that I really look for in people is creativity. Bring me an innovative way to get something done, right? And that's what Lisa did. I had confidence. Lisa had confidence. She's done it before. I knew she was
Mm-hmm.
competent because she's pulled it off at other places. She gave me a creative idea. How are we going to get this done in 8 weeks? We got it done in 8 weeks. So
Mm-hmm.
that just tells you that's how we do it. Confidence, competence, and competency and creativity. And that's how I teach how to make a decision and let some people make a decision and have consequences, positive or not positive for it.
Mm-hmm. And you talked earlier you were talking about how the manager versus kind of the leader model, right? And you're saying, hey, I will tell you what the vision of end result I'm looking for, but I'm not going to tell you how to get there.
Right.
But you got to figure out how to do it. But oftentimes the biggest challenge that business leaders, entrepreneurs have is they kind of want to, I don't want to call it micromanage, but they want to kind of control every step that they take, so they can make sure that the end result is guaranteed. But it is a very difficult thing to let go of that sort of a mentality. What advice would you give that entrepreneur?
And I was guilty of that for a long time. I'm not the end all, right? I had to learn this. And I'll give you an example. I'll give you a perfect example that you can relate to. So I was in Toronto at my coach session, strategic coach session. And our coach, her name's Teresa Easler, and said, let's have lunch. Okay. So, and I didn't know they had a little room back in the back, right, for their private little room for lunch. So we went back into the little room, have lunch. We're having lunch together. Another person joins us. And all of a sudden, Dan Sullivan joins us. Says, can we have lunch with you? Now I'm with a master. All right. I've been with masters before, right? All right. So I started asking him questions. All right. I started asking, and the question I asked him is this. I said, how did you come up with this concept called CoachCon? After all these years, why are you doing this? He goes, I didn't do it. I said, the team said that this is something we need to do. They came to me and said, Dan, you're going to be on stage this and this and this. And he said, okay. And he said, you live with the decision. And I said, he had no clue, right? When you're an entrepreneur, what he learned years ago was he had to trust his people to make the call. And more times than not, they've made the right call on his business, right? But that also gave me another reference point for me. It's like, you know what? I can give the vision out, but if I get my hands in there, all I'm going to do is mess it up. And I give you an example, my personal example, being an entrepreneur. I hired my first person I hired is my EA, Kelly. First person, right? Hired her. somebody to do my calendar, my travel, just the basic admin stuff. Okay. Well, for all these years in Oracle, I didn't have an EA. I had to do it myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there were times where I would just get in the calendar, I'd do it, right? Because it'd be easier for me just to do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
She ripped me a new one day. She called me up and said, listen, if you don't think I can do this, tell me. But this is my job. I know how to do this. You do what you do well. Let me do this.
Mm-hmm.
And she put me in my place. And I said, all right, you're right. You're exactly
Mm-hmm.
right. I hired you to do a job, and I'm trying to mess with it. All I'm doing is double and triple booking myself. All I'm doing is messing things up because that's not my unique ability. Her unique ability is organization, right? Her Colby is totally opposite of my Colby. That's the reason I hired her. So you got to trust your people, right? You got to trust them. Sometimes they're going to make the wrong call, and they're probably not going to do it the way you want it done. But if they get the outcome, like the outcome was Coach Con, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Dan was on stage, and Dan did what he was told. Look what happened. Amazing experience for everybody.
Yeah.
So let people do their jobs and live and die with the results.
Yeah, that's an entrepreneur's dream, right? Having those A+ players in your team that are actually very strategic and forward thinking, coming up with innovative, like you said, like creative, competent, and have the confidence to be able to do it, right? Like if you have those people in your team, like you're golden.
Yep.
That's like a dream come true.
That's what you look for in people, right? That's what I look for in people. And everybody I hire, those are the three things I look for. Because first two are usually pretty easy to find. It's that person that can bring you a creative solution, innovative, right?
Yeah.
Something different. Because I want to be different. I don't want to be like the same old entrepreneur. I want to do something different. Bring me something different on how you do it differently, right? Yeah. Lisa brought me a unique solution on how to get a CRM and how to manage my operations. I don't touch it. I don't touch it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the key ingredient, right? Because we call them human capital. That's an investment you're making into a human being that's going to bring those three things into your organization to take it to the next level.
That's right.
Obviously, Dave, we can sit here and talk a lot, and you've written a lot of books. You've had a lot of life experience. You've spoken with a lot of entrepreneurs and coached a lot of people. And you obviously probably, like you said, you have to learn to coach yourself. So having gone through life experiences and kind of the knowledge you've acquired over these years, what advice give the younger self to the young Dave Sanderson?
Yep. If I had to go back to 1984, right when I got out of college in 1983, 1984, it's probably the lesson I learned out of the Miracle on the Hudson. Don't judge people. You know, I can't tell you, Sammy, how many. I look back and I'm ashamed of myself. How many relationships I've caused not to have, money I could have had, right? All these things that just because I would quickly judge somebody. And I go back to my dad, and and I told this story the other day. I said, but you got to put things in proper perspective of timelines, right? My dad grew up in the 30s. He raised kids in the 60s. So go back, say when we were getting raised in the 60s, we turned the TV on, and what would you see? You see riots in the streets. You see Vietnam on TV, and he'd call them long-haired hippie freaks, right? Anybody with long hair is a hippie freak, right? Anybody who did that, who smoked dope, was a freak, right? So he judged, and I'm not judging him because that's just the way he grew up, right? So as a child, I heard it and absorbed a lot of that. So I see people, it's like, you know what? The guy's long hair. I can't identify with that person. I don't even want to be around that person. This guy's smoking dope over here. That's not for me, right? And all of a sudden, like I said, I realized after that experience, after the Miracle on the Hudson, it's like, you know what? If I could just drop that and get to know the person first, right? And that's why I tell people that one of the greatest things about Marvel movies, I love Marvel movies, Captain America, Iron Man, all that. I love it because what they do extremely well is they tell the backstory of the person, how they became who they become. And that's when I realized, if you understand the backstory of Captain America, right? How he had to grow up and do what he did, you would never think that, he what he was. And I was like, if I go back to tell myself, I said, Dave, just be less judgmental. Just, when you see somebody, don't judge them immediately and watch what happens. I bet you I'd be in a whole different place right now. I know that.
Yeah. And then you have a positive outlook on that person's capacity and capability, and you give them a shot.
Yeah.
And you encourage them and you coach them and make them better. Right. And that's what you would do.
Exactly right.
Where can people hear about, see some of the content that you have and the resources that you make available?
Well, thank you very much. My website is DaveSandersonSpeaks.com. I put everything out there. If you interact with me there, you'll definitely get some interaction back from me. But I tell people, really go out to LinkedIn, because I do a lot of LinkedIn. I write a weekly blog with new content every week. So you'll get new content of my thought process and what I've learned to be able to apply immediately. But also, what we're really excited about, and keep eye out, I've created a workshop or a master class, whatever you want to call it, about how to have a limitless life. All these things that we talked about, in addition to a lot of other. So check it if you're interested. You want to explore. Go out on LinkedIn, connect with me, give me a message. Hey, when you're ready, to launch this, let me know. I love to have people involved with that, because this is the best. What I've learned is give the best to everybody up front. Just give it all up front. And if they want to work with you in the back end, great. But give your best up front. And that also helps me fulfill my promise that I made in 1997 is leave it with somebody else. So check me out on LinkedIn at David Sanderson on LinkedIn, and you'll get a lot of content, and please connect with me.
Awesome. Well, Dave, I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your life lesson and wisdom with my audience.
Thank you very much for having me, Samuel, and bless you. Thank you.
Awesome.
This episode of Coffee with Closers is brought to you by One IMS, a leading digital marketing agency helping businesses win new customers. To request a free marketing ROI audit, please visit oneims.com. If you enjoyed this video, please share it. To make sure you never miss an episode, please subscribe.